Hi, this is Burke Magnus with ESPN, and this is Cars and Culture with Jason Stein.
Well, Burke, welcome to the program. It's not often that we have a network executive on the show, but oh so appropriate as we consider cars and culture. You've certainly had an impact on both, and we're going to discuss that here today. But I want to start with the challenge that you had to do over the course of the last couple of years. And it was written that you had a very busy number of months scrambling to fill a schedule when, of course, the pandemic forced the shutdown of everything. I'll start with this. What does a business model look like when you can't do your business model?
Great question. I mean, it was, I'll never forget, where I was on March 11th, 2020. I happened to be at a retirement party for a colleague in New York City, but that was the night that, the NBA canceled their games and sort of put the season on pause because of a positive test. Rudy Gobert on the Utah Jazz, and I was sitting at this party, and there was a TV, of course, on ESPN, as we I think are required to do at all ESPN
Right.
functions.
Mandatory.
But I knew from that instant, and pretty simultaneous to that, I started getting phone calls both from people at ESPN and from the NBA, specifically because we had two games that night. And I just left. I immediately got in my car and started to head home because I knew that this was the beginning of something that was going to be serious and significant, to our business. And ultimately, we had at ESPN one more day. The next day was Thursday, in the office, and then Friday, like so many other places, we sent all of our employees home and scrambled to figure out how we would run ESPN essentially remotely. And simultaneous to that was the postponement or suspension or cancellation of event after event, league after league, just sort of domino, for the remainder of the year. And we're in the live sports business primarily, and that was an all hands on deck moment in terms of how to fill our schedule without sports happening, or with limited sports happening. I'll get into that in a minute, because we did some fun and creative things that I think we ordinarily wouldn't do, or wouldn't have the ability to do to populate our schedule. But one aspect of it all that I'm really actually very, very proud of is that we never went off the air. There was never a day, there has not been a day since then that we haven't been on the air with some live programming. That, initially that took the form of Sports Center and our morning show Get Up and other things. We kept a live studio presence on the air the entire time. And that was mostly to sort of report to sports fans what was happening, what we were hearing from the NBA or Major League Baseball, or the Masters was not far away from that day in March. So to have SportsCenter be that beacon for sports fans to try and make sense of it all was really important to us, and we made sure that was on every day.
Which, of course, throughout the years has been the case. If you go back to 9/11, I mean, you gravitated to SportsCenter to figure out how the sports world was going to react to that event. But it's one thing to sort of have an incident where the sports world pauses. It's another to cancel everything outright. And when it is your source of programming. So what does that look like? Are you in a conference room with a whiteboard trying to figure out how do we fill time? There was no end in sight at that point. Yeah. And that's your lifeblood.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we only had one day of that dynamic, because that was our immediate reaction, which was, we have a big conference room, like so many companies do, and we call it the war room. Like it
is a war room.
Yeah. And that's where we were on Thursday of that week in March. And the immediate task was just to try and get a few days ahead, right? It felt a little bit like I was a history major in college. So, I have all of these things in my mind where, you can compare it to, and it was kind of like trench warfare. It was almost like like kind of World War I. You were trying to get, 20 yards further of ground, of territory, and it felt like a slog. But we went day by day, hour by hour, day by day, week by week, and it was quite a while actually before we were working ahead more than about a week or 10 days. And what we tried to do was really just process the information that was coming in terms of what was going to happen and what was not going to happen. Try and discern timelines, for leagues. It was the ultimate, moving target. And then really when we realized that there was going to be an extended period of time where we had limited, if any, live events, how are we going to make sense of the 24/7 programming schedule, and what could we do to try and put some structure to it and attract viewers as best we could. And what we decided to do there was just build nights, theme nights, right? Where we went to the NFL and we got the right to put on old Monday Night Football games. And we did that on Monday, and baseball was on, MLB was on Tuesday, NBA was on Wednesday, Thursday we did college football, Friday night was like fight night, boxing and UFC, and Saturday was kind of a hodgepodge. And, Sunday became ultimately our movie night, right? Where the one thing we were extremely fortunate to have in process and almost to completion was our great series on Michael Jordan and the Bulls, The Last Dance.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it wasn't quite ready.
Yep.
Talk about a high wire act. I mean, the one thing we did, which was really nerve wracking, was we advanced that project to the point where we started airing it before it was done being produced. And
really?
So, it was a 10 episode run, and we had, I think 2 or 3 more to be finished. So we knew that it was going to be once a week. We knew we had 10 weeks. So we figured, okay, we were confident it could get done. And so we started, and it became a phenomenon. Obviously it was an excellent film. It was an excellent film to begin with, but to have it be pretty much the only thing of consequence, new and original, on in sports, was, really kind of elevated it to a new level. But we were, as the saying goes, better to be lucky than good. We had that just about ready to go when the pandemic hit. So, well,
and of course it became, as they say, must-see TV, and during COVID became, I think, a little bit of a respite for those who were stuck at home, and it was great programming. But that's interesting. So all hands on deck saying, okay, let's finish this thing because we're running out of time, because next week is coming and the following week is coming. I mean, it must have been a scramble.
Yeah, it was. And, the other thing we were doing was, we stretched the definition of what was passable, I guess, in terms of content, and with a premium on live events. They were playing baseball in Korea. I don't know if you noticed, but every single morning we had a game live from the Korean Baseball League on ESPN. And, I got to know teams like the Doosan Bears and, everybody. I mean, it's sports, right? So it's supposed to be fun, right? So, everybody was at ESPN was picking their favorite Korean baseball team, and we were following them. And it was, so we were doing things like that, and we were scouring, the globe for anything and everything that we could offer by way of live sports. And then again, balancing that with studio news and information primarily via Sports Center, and then, try to mine our original content and our archives, with some semblance of order to it, having beyond The Last Dance. I mean, having basically 10 years of 30 for 30 films, which were all excellent, and, about 100 films, that became a very useful tool in the toolbox as well. It was, now that, with the benefit of hindsight, it was quite a fun and fascinating challenge, for us. Not something I care to repeat, at all, but it was one of those moments where I was very proud of the people and the culture of ESPN, everybody rose to the occasion. Oh, by the way, while also balancing all the stress and strain on their own personal lives, like everybody had to face in terms of the lockdown and, remote work environment and different circumstances for people if they were living in New York or if they had kids, small kids and family and school and all that came with, that period was a challenge, but hopefully we're on the other side of that.
All the while, too, you were helping to negotiate new rights agreements with the NFL, and Major League Baseball, the NHL, the SEC. You're doing that at a time when those entities aren't even operating.
No, that was another fascinating part of it all. And for me, like it was a major change for me in my life relative to what my normal day to day was pre-COVID. I travel quite a bit, quite extensively as part sort of the normal course of business. That went from, a lot to zero overnight. And, somehow, which, actually was to prove to be, a great thing from a productivity perspective. I mean, you don't realize it when it's happening, but the amount of time you travel, which is not easy and was not easy pre-COVID, and it's now even more difficult. It takes a lot of time, right? So you got to get to the airport, you got to deal with parking, you got to get through security, you got to be on a plane, you got to get to your hotel, and just like the amount of time you spend getting from point A to point B, as opposed to sitting, in an office or at your desk at home, proved to be, I'll exaggerate and say I didn't know what to do with all my free time. But it was one of those things where we realized that, that because of the circumstances were so different, we actually had an opportunity, to do what we did on the right side. And other than the fact that that process is very, under normal circumstances, done in person across a conference room table, eye to eye, face to face. Relationship management is a big part of what I do with our partners, our league partners and property partners. We all kind of were in the same boat. So it's, nobody was offended if you didn't show up, in person. Everything was expected to be virtual. We did some really complicated things, but it was oddly effective, and we did a lot of deals.
Yeah, and oddly serendipitous that you were put in charge of original content in November of 2020.
Yeah,
it's exactly what you needed, was original content.
Yeah, exactly, and that we have a really talented team of people who work on original content under our 30 for 30 banner and ESPN Films banner, and now ESPN Plus, with so much of the series, the kinds of things we're doing, like the Tom Brady series we're doing right now. We have a project with Derek Jeter that's going to hit next summer. I mean, it's, I look at that as, I have the privilege of being a steward for a really talented group of people that frankly don't need me, meddling in what they do. It's more a question of managing, right, and keeping everything on the rails. A very, very different process than the live rights acquisition process. But critically, it's the third leg of the stool for us, right? In no particular order, really. It's obviously live event programming, news and information, and studio, and original content and films, and that all comes together to really, across the broad platform that we have as part of Disney, with ABC on the broadcast network side, multiple ESPN networks, our ESPN branded social and digital, including the ESPN app and ESPN.com, and all of our social outlets, and now ESPN Plus on direct to consumer. It's a lot of mouths to feed, as with content, but those are the key components. And every day that goes by, original becomes, I think, more important to that effort. as you surround, as you offer people a diverse option of things over the course of, of a sports year.
This program is titled Cars and Culture, and I would argue, and I'm sure you would too, that sports is culture in America. Sports is culture globally. Is
Mhm.
ESPN the keeper of much of our culture?
That sounds really big and heavy. So I don't, ESPN has always been a very humble culture. I think, our not old, he's not old at all, but our former president, George Bodenheimer, used to always use the children's book, The Little Engine That Could, right, to sort of motivate people, right? And that's because for a long period of time we were the insurgent, right? We were that little engine in the face of the big broadcast network sports departments. And
yeah, ESPN was an upstart. It's hard to believe at this point,
yeah,
but it truly was.
And we used to joke with him, he used to say that long after it was true anymore, right? I mean, we became we became big and we became enormous, but we've always kept that part of our culture where people you work hard and you roll up your sleeves, and we're all sports fans and we're doing it for people like ourselves, and it's fun, right? So I don't know that it may be true what you said, but nobody thinks of it that way. We just try to do right by fans, and so that's kind of how we think about it.
If we look at that third leg of your stool, original content is so critical, as you say. And then if we talk Tom Brady or Derek Jeter or Michael Jordan, ESPN is that keeper of the culture. It is the a window into many of our lives, how we felt about those players at the time, how we felt about those teams. And it becomes a bit of a cultural icon to some extent, or a cultural vault even. So maybe outside of live events or news shows, the original content keeps the culture alive, keeps sports culture alive.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the way we look at it probably goes back to the formation of 30 for 30 now over a decade ago. That was done in conjunction with our 30th anniversary. We're now a 42-year-old company, so we've been at it for a while. But we looked at our role relative to what you discussed in terms of documenting, sports history in a way. And they're not all, grainy black and white. Obviously, we're doing Tom Brady, he's still on the field playing. But we looked at sort of the dynamic you discussed as an important part of what we could deliver to sports fans. And, sometimes that's an older story, sometimes it's a current story, but it's all to try and provide fans additional access and additional context to what's happening in sports. And 30 for 30 got that ball rolling years ago. Now we continue to do those projects. We do things under the ESPN Films banner. We do things under ESPN Original Content. And now, again, with ESPN Plus, we're into episodic things. It's not just standalone films. We can do shorts and series like Peyton's Places, which has now got offshoots. His brother Eli's doing one with college football, and we're doing others in other sport categories as well. But yeah, I mean, we look at that as an important part of the fan experience. And clearly, whether it's what we're doing or what others are doing, because others are certainly in the space as well, fans are reacting to that. They want that as part of the the quilt, if you will.
And ESPN now represents the fabric of sports across the country, around the world. The exposure to female athletes as well, something that I think probably in the 42, originally 42 years ago was not as prominent, and certainly is now. So showing the true quilt of America, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, we've been heavily involved and invested in women's sports for many years. a lot of that manifests itself, or has roots back to our activities in college sports, which is so integral to the offering, that we do. We're really proud of the fact that, for example, we're the home of the NCAA women's basketball tournament. We were a founding partner of the WNBA 25 years ago. Whether it's women's soccer, volleyball, lacrosse, tennis is huge. Tennis, which is probably the ultimate manifestation of, an equal presentation of women and men's sports simultaneously, which I think the world aspires to recreate that in many other sports and categories. Yeah, to me, it's again absolutely essential. We look at sports fans as not one thing, but as many things that come together. Sports is a great unifier for our country, the people of our country, the people of the world. And in order to be effective, and by the way, that's why, diversity and inclusion has been a company value and priority for us for many years, because it's not just the right thing to do, but it's also a business imperative. You need your product to reflect your audience, and we recognize that our audience is very diverse in every dimension of that, and you need your content to reflect that. And we've taken that approach relative to women's sports since the very beginning.
I want to get into some cars now.
Sure.
But first, Burke, let's go back to Holy Cross. You're actually a former rugby player.
I am, yes.
You mentioned being a history major, but you were a sports guy right from the start. And by the way, would probably credit Professor William Green or Professor David O'Brien for getting you where you are, at least pushing you on your path to get going. Most people wouldn't know you were a reporter at the National Catholic Reporter, correct?
You did your research. You're going deep into the archives.
Deep into the Burke Magnus archives.
Yeah.
But you were a car guy. You were a Formula One guy as a kid.
Yeah, I was an everything kid in terms of my fandom. I'm part of the Wide World of Sports generation. That was like the beacon for me, to have that show take me around the world, and literally like Jim
McKay.
Jim McKay, like the slogan was absolutely true. So like I remember the cliff diving in Acapulco, and
sure,
bobsledding in San Moritz, and Formula One was part of it. And I remember I also was sort of a religious Indy 500 watcher when I was a kid. To me, I just loved big events, and I loved almost any form of competition growing up. I was fascinated by it. I wasn't particularly oriented towards cars. I was not a shade tree mechanic when I was growing up. In fact, I can put gas in a car. I can make sure my tires are at the proper pressure. I'll leave everything else to the professionals, in terms of my own ability to service an automobile. But I was always fascinated. I love the Formula One. To me, and for kids to this day, like the technology and the beauty of these machines, and they just seem like spaceships to me, and they were just so cool, and everything around it was cool. And I think that it remains that to this day. It's sort of kind of ebbed and flowed in American sports culture over the years in terms of its popularity. But when I was a kid, Mario Andretti was in F1 for a period of time, and so I think that's how I grew up, and it helped me when I got to ESPN, because there was really nothing. They could have told me you're working on anything, literally anything, and I would have been like, yes, gung ho. I don't care what, horse racing, figure
archery,
bowling, archery. It didn't need to be the NFL or the NBA or Major League Baseball, but that's just because I grew up watching it all.
But you become part of a team that leads Formula One racing through your affiliation with ESPN's programming department that brings F1 back to ESPN. It was the first time when you did it in 2018. It was the first time since 1997. How difficult was that to engineer?
Well, it was, I guess the biggest challenge I had, like, well, first of all, there was a sort of built-in advantage, which was, when Liberty took over ownership and installed, two people that I knew. One I knew very, very well, Sean Bratches,
Who's been on this program? Yeah.
Yeah, former colleague at ESPN, and one I knew pretty well from industry, from our industry, was Chase Carey, who obviously got the job to run it. That made, the contact and the conversation with F1 as easy as it could possibly have been. The interesting thing for me as part of it was the internal conversations, right? I mean, and again, this goes all the way back. When I started at ESPN, one of the first big breaks I got was to manage the motorsports category. This would have been in that late 90s period of time. And at that point we had launched ESPN2, not too long before that. Motorsports was a absolute core component to what we did, right? We had NASCAR rights. We were probably the biggest NASCAR rights holder at the time. We had F1, we had NHRA drag racing, we had IndyCar and kart, we had, supercross and motocross and, hydroplane racing. We had everything. And over time that just, it started to sort of just fall away. And F1 we didn't have for a really long period of time. But I knew, as they say, I knew just enough to be dangerous, right? And when Sean and Chase, we started talking to them, I just wanted to make sure, and all credit to my boss, Jimmy Pitaro, he doesn't, obviously he's running ESPN. He's a huge sports fan. He doesn't need me to make a PowerPoint presentation on why F1 is important, right? But we hadn't had it for so long. So it was just about it. It was as much about getting people to sort of consider that we would get back into motorsports in a meaningful way with a globally important property. Was just, it kind of was off the radar, right? Like, cause we were just kind of out of it. But pretty quickly, and with Jimmy's support, we got into a deep and meaningful conversation about what was possible with Sean and Chase, and it snowballed from there. And personally, I couldn't have been more excited because I went from like, this is a long shot when he first called to like, oh my God, I think we're going to do this. And it was, so it was cool. It was really cool. And I recognized, and this is where Sean and Chase were brilliant in this regard, because they made the US market a priority in terms of, they recognized the upside of making F1 more significant in this market. And that's what the deal was all about. And they knew, and Sean knew, because we've known each other for years and years, that the best way to do that in the US was through ESPN. And so, and he knew that we could be motivated to really put our shoulder behind doing that. And that's sort of was the essence of the initial conversations. And
I'm guessing you could have never have envisioned where we sit today when we think of the impact of 4 years of Drive to Survive, of course, on Netflix. You look at the ratings, which I think at last count were up, 40 to 50%. You can tell me from the time that you first took over, and the impact. And now, of course, Formula One's expansion into places like Miami, which will come early next year. So in a way, it's a bit of a stroke of genius to some extent.
Yeah, well, again, better to be lucky than good. I think the timing was right. I think Liberty has made a lot of, again, I'm not an expert on the competition or, the car specification or any of the changes they're making on the technical side. I just know that I feel like I know what sports fans will respond to if given a little bit of a nudge. And I knew that, one of the other key elements of it was, the great job that F1 does on their world feed production, and then, obviously we take the the Sky production. Can't believe I said Star. The Sky production, which is excellent. And so I knew that what was going to be on the screen was going to be absolutely top notch, and that was an important component to it as well. But you're right, a bunch of things came together. We made a commitment. I mean, we made a commitment to this was not going to be wherever we could put it on the highest possible stage. We were going to do that. We put races on ABC. We put races on ESPN, not ESPN2. We did all 3 practice sessions and qualifying. If we had a network, we put it on. I knew that that there was going to be some fits and starts at the beginning, but that ultimately, if we could get some momentum, it would just be that much easier for us to continue to grow and build and push. And and then Drive to Survive happened too, which was obviously, in a way, it was kind of what we would consider to be off-channel marketing, right? Which is, Netflix has an audience that's completely different from our networks, and they were showing, this series that was good, well done, compelling, and all the while, like, if you're building fans, they have to come back to watch the races. I mean, the races were only in one place. So for us, it was
that original content. Yeah, the original content was being done for you.
Yeah. So it was
feed on
itself. Great compliment to what we were doing.
And of course, Sean was behind the effort to get Drive to Survive out there as well, working with the director and producers of that. And you said something a moment ago that I just want to pick up on, because some people might not recognize this. You did make the decision to carry Sky Sports presentation, and your friends at the Sports Network, also known as TSN in Canada, had already been using Sky Sports. No point in going out and hiring your own people. You've got the best coverage in the world there, correct?
Yeah, I look at it that way. Now, my design would be over time that we continue to put more of an ESPN, flair to it, if you will. Like I would like, in the not too distant future, to have some ESPN people on site at every race, right? For the North American races, maybe we do even more than that. Maybe it's, have a studio. We did a little bit of that in Austin this year. Good Morning America was there. ESPN, our studio and Sports Center was there. And I think we can continue to build on that to make to give it an ESPN stamp on it, right? Because again, equally as important to the race coverage and the original content is news and information. So I would love to have a person there, if only to service Sports Center with our own, specialized news and information coverage, having, our people talk to drivers and ask questions that are relevant to the US audience. That's a next step development in our coverage, but I'm looking at it hopefully as a next year thing, not a distant effort. But you're right. I mean, Sky, their coverage is amazing. The talent is incredible. The resources they dedicate to it, and the number of people and commentators they have, you couldn't ask for anything more. So again, I think there was some sentimentality around the job that and the people that NBC had involved for so many years, and I understand that completely. But again, I felt like over time, people were going to respond better to the level that Sky was presenting.
Do you think there's an opportunity to do more behind the scenes efforts with other sports? And you were part of ESPN original entertainment team that really served as the project manager for some great programs, the Dale Earnhardt 3. Critically acclaimed, second highest rated movie of 2004 on ad supported cable, things like that. Are there more, the behind the curtain efforts that you think will come out of some of the latest projects that you've been a part of, or out of something like the Netflix series?
Are you talking for F1 specifically?
In general, out of other leagues?
Yes, I think so. I think people have recognized the point that you just made, which is, and we've known this for years, and we're trying to sort of also integrate it into the live event coverage. Access is so important, right? Like, so important. People want to see something. They want to have media take them somewhere they can't get on their own, whether that's a locker room or a bus ride to the stadium, or to get to know the personalities of the people, which in F1's case, I think there's so much upside there. I mean, just these drivers who you don't get to know when you watch the race at all, and then you do get to know them, in a behind the scenes piece, or in an access, or just something fun and frivolous. Like we had Daniel Ricciardo, talk to us about in Austin about his friendship with Josh Allen, the Buffalo Bills quarterback, and how that came about, and how he was wearing a Bills jersey and he's a fan, and like,
or Daniel drove Dale Earnhart's car around.
Right.
Amazing moment.
Yeah. So all of, that gets fans invested in the people and the personalities. And if you can figure out a way to do that without compromising or disrupting the competitive, dynamic, the why they're there to do their job, right? And then I think you have some real upside there, and that goes for every sport across the board. Tennis, golf, the team sports. It's why NFL Films has been successful for so many years, right? I mean, so yeah, that's only going to continue to grow. And we want to be a part of it, but we also recognize that drives, fans to become more invested and more interested in than when the games happen.
Or you can put your favorite personalities on television broadcasting the game with the Manning cast.
Yes, great point. Lest I forget.
What an enormously successful creative thing to do. You got a couple of personalities that love to play off each other. Whether it's Eli shaking his hips like Shakira to break down a play, or it's either one of them donning jerseys. What do you make of all that?
I just think it's one of those moments that happens periodically in this business where you just come across something that works, flat out works. Like, they have chemistry because they're brothers, that no other two people would have necessarily, except I guess another pair of brothers, but they're completely unique. I mean, two brothers who have both won Super Bowls, both competed at the highest level, have fun and interesting and approachable personalities. We've now entered the phase where we almost don't need to call anybody to be a guest on it. They're calling us, because it's just so fun, and it's a different way, to watch a game. And by the way, like, I'm the biggest football fan in the world, believe me, college and pro. But there's a lot of football on television. So by the time you get to Monday night, as a sports fan with all your regular life, demands, it better be a pretty good football game to keep you interested, unless there's something else, right? And I think that they are that something else. Like, it's a great way to consume a game. The NFL is the ultimate league for they've mastered the ability to attract fans to watch two teams that aren't their team, anyway, right? Like, I'm a New York Giants fan, but I sit down and watch Monday Night Football every week because the NFL has trained me to care, and I do. But this makes it that much easier because while you might not be interested in the traditional presentation of every single game, you have this now fun and interesting and cool way to watch it.
It's entertainment. It's entertainment, which is what sports should be, right?
Exactly. But it's it's fun. Like, sports is fun.
The future of sports media is the community of sports fans. And when I say community, I mean extensions into mobile-based co-viewing platforms is maybe the next big innovation in broadcasting. Is that perhaps just as important as the quality of what's on the field or on the ice? Or
Yeah, I think there's something there, and we're definitely tugging on that thread. Sports at its essence is a shared experience. We've learned a lot during the pandemic of how to try and recreate that in a world where for a long time we couldn't gather together. But there's, beyond the current circumstance, I think a future state without question has that community element to it, beyond maybe what it's been for you or I growing up, right?
Yep.
And I don't know. I think I like the way you put it there in terms of just as important, right? Like I don't think it's something that supplants what's happening on the field. But I think, again, in order to maximize audience and continue to grow fan bases, sports are going to have to consider how to solve that with every bit the urgency that they focus on what happens on the field or on the court or on the course.
Yeah.
And that our role is less so. I mean, obviously we don't have a role in terms of what happens on the field, but we realize that dynamic, and now I think leagues are realizing that the sports fan of today, and really the sports fan of the next decade or more, is very different from the sports fan of the prior generation in terms of how they behave and frankly how you can reach them, right?
You have said before that a successful media entity in sports is going to have an array of vehicles to reach consumers. And what you meant by that was it's critically important to reach fans through broadcast, multi-channel, direct-to-consumer, digital news and information, social. We're a long way from your internship at CBS Sports Programming Office, aren't we, Burke?
Yes, in every possible way you could define that, I suppose. But yeah, that's exactly what we believe here, and definitely the approach we take. Part of the transition that's happening right now is that leagues and media entities are in a never-ending quest to reach fans, and we think we have a pretty good mousetrap with all of the things that you just mentioned. Like I said, ABC, ESPN, our digital and social, the app, ESPN Plus on the direct-to-consumer side. That is all of those things, in a fragmented world where people have an unlimited array of things tugging at their time, is really gives you the best chance to succeed. Without one of those things or two of those things, much more difficult, much more challenging. I get questions a lot about literally specific competitors of ours in the media space, and I generally deflect that by saying that's not how the way we look at competition. The way we look at competition is people's time, right? We're all in a chase for share of time, and whatever takes somebody away, whether it's a different form of entertainment or going out to dinner or a kid's sports game or anything, that is what you're trying to overcome in a really complicated and fragmented world, like I said.
Well, heavy or not, Burke Magnus, you are documenting culture on a daily basis. And kudos to you and your team, and for all the excellent work that you do. I appreciate you sharing your thoughts here on Cars and Culture. And we look forward to the next interesting twist in the ESPN story. I'm sure there will be fascinating ones to come.
Yeah, no problem at all. Happy to have done it. It's a pleasure to meet you. And I look forward to getting to my next F1 race. I never thought I would go this long. I think the last one was Silverstone in July of 2019. So, hopefully 2022 offers more opportunities.
No, Happy New Year to you.
Thank you. You too, Jason.
The automobile is one of the most important inventions that revolutionized the modern world. In America, the rich history of car culture runs deep as technology continues to shape the future of the industry. Jason Stein,
former publisher of Automotive News,
is here to share the stories of people passionate about cars, from industry leaders and innovators to car-obsessed celebrities. Buckle up as Jason takes you inside the boardroom, onto the track, and around the bend on Cars and Culture on Sirius XM Business Radio.